Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Kim Knox, President of the League of Women Voters of San Diego. I'd like to thank you for being here, welcome you. This is a Zoom meeting, so we get to see each other's faces tonight for a change. Now I would like to introduce a very special person. We have big news. We have hired someone to help out at the League. So we now have an employee. Her name is Jessica Fry, and she is actually here tonight. So I'm going to invite her to unmute herself if she just wants to say hi, and you get to meet her.
Hi, good evening, ladies. I'm so glad I was able to join you tonight. So happy to get started with LWV. I'll have to get one of these official backgrounds as well. It's very cool. But a little bit about me. I just finished a 4-year active duty service tour with the United States Marine Corps. I am a prior service member and very happy to be continuing my passion for serving with such a phenomenal organization that does a lot of great work.
All right, thank you so much. We look forward to working with you.
Likewise.
I'm delighted to have such a nice turnout of people interested in working with the League in connection with the 2024 elections. There will be 2 periods during the coming year when there will be an intense amount of in-person League work: in January and February before the March 5th primary, and in September and October before the November election. This evening, we will be discussing that work, but first we will hear from Ashley Ravichet, a board member with the League of Women Voters of California, who will talk about voter registration in day centers and getting cities and counties to do resolutions supporting ACA 4. Ashley volunteers as the Deputy Area Director of Social Policy for the League of Women Voters of California, where she seeks to advance human rights in all aspects of social policy. Under her tenure as president of the League of Women Voters of San Francisco, the organization was recognized with the Hero Award from the Mayor and Human Rights Commission for her advocacy, leadership, and community activism. She represented the League of Women Voters of the US at the UN Climate Conference of the Parties, COP26 and COP27. She has also held various roles in the Bay Area with a fire district board, an emergency preparedness commission, a district attorney oversight committee, a sheriff community oversight group, and a police department's executive sponsor working group on bias and one on use of force. Now I'll present Ashley Ravichet.
Thank you so much, Kim, and thank you to the League of Women Voters of San Diego. Again, my name is Ashley Ravichet, and I am virtually joining you today from the unceded lands of the coastal Miwok up in Marin County. As your president mentioned, I wear many hats with the League, but I got my start with the League engaging voters to register, and voter services was my first official chair role with my local league. So this is really the bread and butter of our organization, and this is where I'm really thrilled to be able to make the connection of criminal justice reform and bring that back into election season and voting rights and what that means for us as an organization. So with this election kickoff event, I'm here to share a little bit more about the League's work to franchise system impacted individuals throughout our state. That is with the implementation of ACA 6 and Prop 17, which restored voting rights to more than 50,000 individuals who are currently on parole. So I will share a little bit more about that implementation and those obstacles, and really just to unpack what League members at the local level can do to engage this particular subset of individuals, and how you can expand your voter registration activities and or fine tune them a little bit more to engage in these spaces. So eligible California voters are deeply impacted by the criminal legal system, and they urgently need our support for education and voter registration services. Ending this participation disparity is something that our state league, as well as many of our local leagues, are deeply engaged in. And it requires both the systemic improvements through the policy side, as well as that grassroots voter engagement that is pretty typical of a local league action. So let me first review for some level setting for those of you who are new to voter registration in jails or with system impacted people, some of the in-reach models, which just basically means bringing the service directly to the individual who is impacted. So that would be registering individuals in jails and parole centers and probation centers. And before I unpack all of those in-reach models, I'm going to also share a little bit more about some of our obstacles that we faced in implementing Prop 17. And then at the very end, I will close with a request for local action to see if your members are interested in engaging in support for our current bill, ACA 4, with that local resolution. So these in-reach models for registering individuals in jails include, and this is a very high level view. So please, if you have questions at all, type them into the chat and I'll do my best to answer them now, or you can connect with me and we can have a conversation about that. But these in-reach models include the basics of advocating for voter registration with the assistance of the elections office and or the sheriff's department. When you're really engaging with access to the jails, you're going to be predominantly working directly with the sheriff and or the sheriff's office and the sheriff's deputies to get access. There's also incarcerated person registration. That would often we see that when an organization like the League provides materials to family members who can have access inside to the facilities and to provide that advocate assistance. The third model would be registration through a mass email or mailers, or really think of it as an education campaign that the local league could take up. The fourth model is elections office registration. So that's really partnering with the Department of Elections and then getting their assistance and making those doors open of becoming a partnership with the sheriffs. So it's the power of the elections office, the power of the sheriff's department, and the in-reach organizations like the League or other system impacted organizations that provide direct services. The last is really just fine tuning who your ask is to. Your ask is to the sheriff department who runs all jails and facilities, and they are the gatekeeper. So that is just the high level view of the different models that you could take and the different approaches. So let me take a moment and really explain a little bit more about what that means. So in 2020, most of you know that the League partnered with the Free the Vote Coalition, and we were successful in passing ACA 6, which was a constitutional amendment, as well as the follow-up voter enacted initiative, Prop 17, and that restored voting eligibility and registration to people who are on parole. So those are individuals who have completed their sentence and conviction, and they are now in what is considered an in custody situation of parole or probation. And so that was really exciting. And we were very eager to start registering immediately people in jails because they've always had their right to vote. And one of the barriers was the narrative of, well, if you're on parole or probation, you do not have your right to vote. So Prop 17 helped, in our eyes, clear up a lot of that confusion. But what we found when we implemented Prop 17 was, well, we were doing that at the backdrop of COVID, when everything was shutting down. Jails that we were registering individuals to vote were no longer open to organizations like the League or any other advocate or service-oriented organizations. For public health, public safety reasons, those doors closed. Now that doors are open post-pandemic living, we're finding that they're not really open, and that the ends that we made at a lot of local levels were not there after the pandemic had subsided. And so that is a major obstacle we are still facing. And each local league has a different connection with their sheriff, has a different landscape politically of what the members feel is important for them, as well as the risks of being in those facilities, of actually acquiring COVID or something like that. We have to remember that our members are also of a specific demographic often, and that it really makes you pause a little bit if your personal health and safety is at risk. So I'm not advocating that anybody does anything that makes them uncomfortable, but I do believe that with collaboration, we can again open these doors. And if the league has had some inroads, open them wider. So it's not just for league access. We've seen a lot of preferential treatment across the state where sheriff's departments are eager and or are willing to work with league members, but that they are not willing to open or provide that same access to organizations that really embody system impacted individuals. So I like to say, if we're going to open the door, then we're going to hold it open for another organization to help with this work, because it really takes all of us. Another implementation obstacle that we found was really that most county registrar's office failed to update their websites with that eligibility information of people on parole. And I actually dug into San Diego's Department of Elections just to see what they have currently on their website. And again, it is a bit confusing. They have included the expanded eligibility for people on parole, but it doesn't go that next step, which we've often seen as a barrier in many communities to say, hey, no, we do have a right to register individuals who are system impacted, who are on probation or parole. I will put into the chat a link to the Secretary of State's website. One of our advocacies that we've been able to achieve is cleaner language on the Secretary of State's website. In my own community, they were unwilling to make specific edits to the language, so it looks very much like what the Department of Elections for San Diego currently displays. And now they have removed the local county Department of Elections and information, and they redirect to a link at the Secretary of State. It just does a little bit more of clarity in expanding that list specifically for individuals impacted by the criminal legal system to really define the eligibility and the requirements that we currently have under state law. So next, we talked about the getting access. So getting access to registering individuals, whether they're in the jail setting or whether you're getting access to a DAPO center or Department of Parole facility, or any agency that would be considered a state agency offering these types of reentry services. So I will go through that a little bit more in more detail. But the long and short of it is that system impacted voters are severely underrepresented in our democracy. And it is more, not just for the league to do, but it is more for all of us who offer these services through education or actual registering voters, to really close this registration and to close this participation gap. So we believe that criminal legal agencies, and when I say we as the league, under the league banner, we believe that these criminal legal agencies like the Department of Parole, Probation, jails, CDCR, these are agencies that have the most contact with system impacted Californians, whether it's through their incarceration or whether it's through their reentry into our communities. And they are uniquely positioned to offer registration directly to these individuals, and often hard to reach voting population. Unfortunately, what we have found after implementing Prop 17 was that these are not actually nationally recognized registration centers under the National Voting Rights Act. So the league has been engaged in advocacy behind the scenes with the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, or CDCR, as well as its Division on Parole Operations, or what I call DAPO centers, to help facilitate some of these gap closures. And at the same time, we've signed on to some letters advocating our Secretary of State to utilize her authority under the National Voting Rights Act, and to designate all of these agencies under Section 7 of the Act as voter registration agencies. The Secretary of State is the only individual with this type of power to expand the eligibility of where you can register a voter. And that is something that I just want to raise to all your members who are going to be possibly engaging in these spaces, that we're looking to do both the closing of the registration gap, more education, but also understanding that there are some obstacles that are outside of our control. Even with the right to vote and the eligibility there, we are having this uphill battle. And we're not advocating for one or the other, we're advocating for both. We want the Secretary of State to expand what the designation of the voting registrar center could be, as well as to get access, which is more of a local question, building the community, working directly with your sheriff and your Department of Elections to understand we do this in partnership, we do this together, and it is really important to have that trust building in that community already. So aside from understanding that those designations of having the jail facility or the probation and parole as that's a systemic improvement for closing this gap, there's other opportunities that local league members can engage in to really advance voting registration at this level. So local leagues, for instance, we've had other local leagues run pop-up tables to increase voter registration, not just of the individuals at the jails, if we didn't have access inside, to run them outside so that the community members there supporting their family could also register. We know that voting and registering to vote is often done, it's almost generationally. So if you are looking at a population that is not voting, then you could almost assume that the people they engage with, whether it's their neighbors or their relatives or their children or their parents, whatever level you're going upwards outside, none of those individuals are getting access to that voter education or the voter materials. So when you register a single person, it's exponential. That sentiment, that empowerment to vote is so wonderful. I never want to discourage any local member who feels, I did a lot of work in that pop-up and I got one person to register. I've been that person. I've been on that discouragement train. And I want to say that one person you got to register just brought their family, that the actions that you don't see, the impact, that ripple effect in the community is not measurable by what we do, but it is so important and it is very much there. So I wanted to leave you with that little bit of inspiration. There's other things we can do. So there's some best practices if you're going to be engaging directly with members who are in jail. Do your research. Understand how you get access, what type of clearance your sheriff's department is going to require. A lot of it is just advanced paperwork. Understand what you can bring in. When you're trying to register voters, there are certain facilities that don't allow you to have paper clips or staples on your documents. You have to really pay attention how many pins you're bringing in to register, or if you're bringing a device. These are things that become big problems when you're not aware of them and you're trying to gain entrance and the sheriff has given you 30 minutes and you need to be out the door in 30 minutes. So do your research, find out what these restrictions are in advance. It will save a lot of headache, a lot of heartache, and a lot of upset volunteers when they're being just turned away because there's staples still in the paperwork. Get connected. Get connected meaning bring a buddy, never engage in these spaces without a buddy, whether that's another league member, whether that's another organization. I specifically would advocate for any league engaging in voter registration in system impacted communities to, like I said, open that door, find out other organizations that do this type of work, or provide services to system impacted, and bring them along. Create a collaboration. It allows many hands, makes light work, and then it also really helps when somebody cannot participate, or funding dries up, or access shifts, or priorities shift in the organization, that the work continues. So be strategic in your approach. It's not all accomplished in 1 year or through one election. It is something that is ongoing, and build that network with that understanding that it's ongoing, and you need someone to always pick up that torch and to continue the work. Planning.
Ashley, I want to ask you
Oh,
one
go
question
for it.
about the jail voting before we move on to ACA 4.
Please do.
So we had, before COVID, we had partnered with Pillars of the Community to go into the jails to do registration. And after COVID, when we contacted the sheriff and the registrar of voters, they seemed satisfied with the system that they're using of allowing people to register on paper, which is then transferred by interoffice memo from the jail to the registrar of voter centers. And then, of course, they vote by mail.
Mhm.
So do you think that's adequate? Do you think that there is added benefit from us being back there in person?
I do think that there is benefit of still kind of auditing, if you will, and that's a terrible word to use when you're dealing with a sheriff's department. So reviewing, um, it is something that the trust of where your vote and how you cast your ballot, and being someone who's impacted, not trusting that the deputy on the other end is going to secure that ballot and to actually move it through the process. That's very much a reality. Having outside organizations like the league or any other individual organization that they feel comfortable, allows that information to be received in a more culturally competent way, as well as ensuring that trust. I mean, registering someone to vote, as we know in this league or in this organization, doesn't guarantee that you vote. So there are plenty of registered voters who don't vote. Um, Part of that education, I would recommend, is fine tuning it, because there's been plenty of ballot initiatives that qualify for the vote. The threshold is dependent 100% on the registered numbers who are voting. So if you have a very high level of registered voters, but the turnout is low, all the ballot initiatives at the local level have a higher threshold. And I want a representative democracy where people both register and vote. But that has been a pretty effective fact to bring to elected officials of, if you don't help this process make that connection between registering and actually casting a ballot, you're just making your work harder in all these other ways. And it's great if you know specifics, like which initiative that they're pushing forward. But yeah, it just makes their work harder by not providing that voice. And I will, address that, which was next point I was going to mention, was that there's a lot of unsuccessful ideas. And just so that I can steer you in the appropriate direction, some of the conversation we have around registering system impacted individuals is just really, we're brainstorming how to increase voter registration, how to increase the right and that participation, which we all know actually helps reduce recidivism. So if you vote when you are in jail, you're more likely to re-enter society, and you're less likely to reoffend. And so one of the things, or I have a list here. So it says unsuccessful ideas that are part of the narrative that we continue to see each year is that people are pushing to make jails polling sites. And that is not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to register and cast votes for people who in a jail setting have always been eligible, and now capture that next group of individuals who are re-entering in probation and parole, who are not being tapped as eligible voters. They've also talked about installing vote by mail boxes in jails. We do not believe that that has the value add of trust. So going through those efforts hasn't really shown the returns that people will cast a ballot. That's that high registration, low voter turnout situation.
Mhm.
Um, the ability to see who actually voted, there is a situation where, you know, your vote is anonymous, but at the same level, at the high Department of Elections, we still have to track who's casting a ballot. There's local ordinances about voter rolls and a lot of information about that. But really, it comes down to more education barriers of getting voter guides into jails. How do you get the information on what to vote on? So those are obstacles that I think the league is very well positioned to help navigate and to build those bridges. Um, but really going back to the just open the doors, it's not just the league's responsibility. And in fact, I would say it's the league's responsibility to expand and to continue working with Pillars for the Community and other organizations, because orgs that work particularly with system impacted individuals, that's that culturally competent resource. That's the individuals who are the trusted messengers. League is often still building these relationships with individuals who are system impacted.
Right.
So beyond that, just reiterating that we're working on many avenues. So build your communications, your partnerships, and that trust with your sheriff to reopen those doors, to regain access to the jails, help advocate for jails and reentry services to become nationally recognized voter registration service agencies. It's again, it's not an either and an or, it's a both. Um, don't be discouraged, even if you get the one to register. That is exponential growth in that community. Um, and then
Ashley,
beyond that,
before we move on, can you
go
tell
for it.
us a little bit about ACA 4?
Yes, that's what I was just gonna scrolling down to move into. So ACA
Thank
4 is our follow up to all of this effort, and that is what the league is currently working on. I'm part of the co-sponsor team. It's another constitutional amendment because it's dealing with voting rights, and what we are seeking is that amendment to change the eligibility, which is currently in our state constitution. It makes any individual who's serving a felony conviction ineligible to cast a vote. So we as an organization, we believe in the fundamental right of all citizens to vote. And I want to preference that with a disclaimer because California has its own voting rights position. It is not the same position that the National League uses. And in fact, the National League has separated its efforts to not focus on engaging or refranchising individuals who are serving felony convictions. They have said if you have a state position, more power to you. National is not supporting this one way or the other. So it's interesting because you serve a felony conviction, and we're very used to this punishment paradigm of, oh, you should have all your rights stripped from you. Well, you don't lose your citizenship. You still pay your taxes. Most individuals will re-enter society. So that's a 94% of people serving felony convictions will re-enter society. They are deeply connected to their existing families and their communities. And if they have children, they're interested in their school district. They're interested in how their community taxes are being raised. Just because you're convicted of a felony doesn't mean you turn all of that interest and love for your family and their well-being off. So we are trying to make that connection. We're also recognizing that there's more than 7,000 veterans who are currently serving felony convictions, and we believe that they themselves have fought to maintain their citizenship and their right to vote, and that should be restored. Um, I don't need to sing the praises of what the league believes in. I know you all understand that our democracy is stronger when everyone has a voice. So what we're doing is we have been engaging local leagues who are interested in floating resolutions in support of ACA4 at their board of supervisors or through their office of their mayor. And I would love to see if your local league is willing to support this effort, and we could make it an easy ask. We already have a resolution template, some talking points that are going beyond just this tip of the iceberg. It really dives into the historical context of, you know, the systemic racism of it being built into our Constitution, which removed people's right to vote because they didn't want Black or brown people having a voice. So this is something that we're continuing to address, and I really hope that your local league would be interested and willing to support a local resolution in this for ACA4. And if you're interested in learning more about what we're doing, it's a 2-year bill, so we'll reintroduce in January, and I'm sure there's going to be lobby day opportunities or maybe some local or geographical community events in Southern California. Whatever it is, I'm here to answer any questions.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the information. And we'll be following up. We'll be sending out an email to everyone who registered for tonight's event, letting them know how they can get involved in that effort and all the other volunteer opportunities that we're going to talk about tonight. So thank you, Ashley, so much for taking time out of your evening to talk with us tonight. We really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, and I'm sorry if I went over, and you have wonderful speakers lined up, so thank you very much for your time.
No worries. Thanks again. All right, next I would like to introduce our past board member, Jean Widener. She's filling in for our current voter empowerment director, Liz Jung, who is traveling for business right now. So Jean is going to talk about where and when we do voter registration and ballot measures in March. Jean?
Thanks, Kim. I'm really delighted to see how many people are here tonight. And the first thing that I want to do is to follow up with Ashley's comments, her remarks about the voter registration in jails and in parole offices, because we have, I was proud to be part of our effort last year to do that. And this is a photo of myself with Catherine Ransom and Sheila Toll at the Chula Vista parole office last year, where we did register some voters. And we also had quite a good success at doing at some of the reentry facilities, at a couple of the jails, where we registered over 30 inmates who were very receptive to our efforts. And in fact, when I was at one of the homeless court sessions where they talk to parolees as they're reentering society, one of the young men there came up to me at the table and thanked me for allowing him to register to vote while he was still in jail last year. So I just want to let everybody know that it is a valuable service that we provide, and I'm hoping that some of you tonight would be interested in looking into volunteering for it some more. And lastly, I want to put in a very brief plug for our Speakers Bureau, and this is our team effort to inform voters primarily of the pros and cons on the ballot measures during each election cycle. And we need volunteers to research the ballot measures, as well as do presentations online and in person to our community organizations that request us to do that. And it's a service that we have provided that is well received in the community. And I'm just going to mention that we apparently will have one ballot measure on the March ballot that has to do with a bond issue for mental health facilities, for behavioral health facilities. So if you are interested in knowing more about that, please let me know. Or if you're interested in getting involved in in our efforts for for any of the pros and cons in the future. So, as many of you already know, the 19th Amendment which recognized the right of women to vote, was ratified in August of 1920, 123 years ago. But the League of Women Voters actually was anticipating it in its success, and it was founded several months before, in February of 1920. And their principal mission was to help new voters feel confident in their ability to evaluate the candidates and the measures on their ballots. So that mission continues today, and our local league has many services that we provide to our voters in our community to provide objective information about their ballot choices, and also how they can learn about the candidates and where they stand. So the next speakers that I'm going to introduce will show how you can get involved with some of these services that we offer to our community, our candidate forums, our electronic voter guide, and finally a campaign finance reform project that we have taken on called Democracy Dollars. So I would first like to introduce Jane Andrews, who has been our events chair in the past and has now taken on the task of being our candidate forums. And I know you've done many of those already, so you're very well qualified to lead us in this effort, Jane.
Thanks, Jean. It's many of you do know me as events chair, but given that this is a very big election year ahead, I'm going to put events aside for certain of the periods up prior to election where there's a lot of voter empowerment work. And so I agreed to take on the candidate forums chair, partly because I really enjoy candidate forums, but I think it's one of the most valuable contributions the League makes to inform voters. Seeing the candidates in a head-to-head conversation really shows how they think, how they dodge questions, and it tells a lot about their character as well. So it's also something that's really a League brand specialty. And I think the first time I heard about the League of Women Voters was when they ran the Kennedy-Nixon debate in 1960. And we're known for this kind of presentation, even though we don't run national debates anymore. And part of that is because the League has a very set way of doing candidate forums that is geared for fairness. We really monitor the time. We make sure that questions that come from the audience are structured and are screened. And it's a very respectful process, in contrast to some of the way these things are done on TV. So I think it reflects the League's values of fairness and discipline. I'm going to give you a little sense of how many forums we tend to do. And one of the things that's different this year is we have a March primary. Everybody's used to us having a June primary and then the November election. But March is coming up. And in the fall of 2020, we did 17 candidate forums. And as you recall, that was during COVID. And Kim Knox, in her brilliance, was able to help shift it all onto Zoom. Now, nowadays, people seem to be asking more for in-person forums again, but we do both. And the kinds of forums that we did in 2020 included congressional candidates, San Diego mayor, San Diego City Council, a county. We did an Imperial Beach. I think it was a mayor. We've done Chula Vista City Council. We've done quite a few school races. So we do the local ones. So at any rate, I am anticipating that we will have a busy January and February, but it will be a bit of a dry run for an even busier August, September, and October. And I think what'll be good about that is people can get some experience. And what we do is we work usually with a community group who's the host and who set things up. Occasionally, the league will set one up ourselves. We do that in a very choosy kind of a way. So, any rate, we already have one candidate forum on the books, and it is for the City Council District 3, Steve Whitburn, it's a contested, Monday, February 19th. So otherwise, it's all quite uncertain right now. Nomination papers are due December 7th. So at that point, we'll have a little clearer sense of what lies ahead. But I thought I'd just give you some of the ones that I'm keeping a close eye on. Is that Sarah Jacobs, she has been redistricted, her district has been shifted, and she now has 4 opponents, 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And as you probably know, the primary will whittle those candidates down to the top 2. But that should be very interesting. We also, let's see, Chula Vista also has a very contentious city council race. We're waiting to see who might oppose the mayor. I've heard there are 8 people thinking about it, but I don't know how many will follow through. So there's kind of a lot that's happening. I want to say just a quick word about the kind of volunteers we need. For every forum, we have a moderator who does have a script, because this is quite a scripted event. And that's somebody who has, some comfort in a moderator role. We have 2 people who are question screeners. And this is one that I find to be quite an interesting role, because one of the league ways when it's in person is that we distribute, and this is done across the country, by the way. I've been a league member in Massachusetts, and it's still the index cards and the pencils, because it keeps people from having, giving speeches instead of asking questions. And it also reduces duplications and gives us a sense we're going to get a spread of topics. But being a question screener, you kind of have to know the general topics that are going to be likely to be discussed. And then you screen the index cards and pass them to the moderator. And if it is online, we have an online way of doing this too. We need a timekeeper, which is a pretty straightforward job, and pages who help collect the index cards. So it's a lot of fun. And I hope that, I know we've got some brand new people. We have some old timers in the audience and some people who are not yet members. And it's a great way to get to know the league and to be engaged. So I did put my email in the chat. I'd love to hear from anyone who has questions about this. There is on our website, under voter services, there is a section that says candidate forums, and it also has my email on it. There will be a way to sign up for shifts also on the website under voter services. But I will tell you more about that. We will be having an in-person event on Saturday, January 13th, to talk about this in more depth. So I'll hope to see you there. Thank you. And now, am I introducing the next person?
You can go right ahead, Jane, and
Okay.
introduce the next person if you like.
All right. Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Julie Ann C., who has, I don't know how many years you have done our Voter's Edge, and she's a genius at it. So over to you, Julie Ann.
Hello, everybody. I'm delighted to see so many people interested in getting involved with voter empowerment projects. The League has been known for preparing impartial voter guides that give every candidate on the ballot, regardless of their campaign chest and how many advertisements they can pay for, the ability to present their priorities and their qualifications to the voters. For decades, California's leagues have used a different online forum for these from the national leagues. However, a few weeks ago, the decision was made for California to join the National League's platform, which is called Vote 411. So for years, California had been using Voters Edge instead, and Voters Edge is no more. I have very mixed feelings about that. I will definitely miss the level of information that Voters Edge was able to present. For example, with Vote 411, we will no longer be able to provide the campaign finance data for the federal candidates and the state candidates and the state propositions, which for me was very entertaining. If you remember a few years ago, there were two competing ballot measures about plastic bags, and being able to go on Voters Edge and see where is the money coming from for these two propositions was very illuminating as to who benefits from the passage of those. But so I will miss not being able to present that information to voters with Vote 411. However, there are significant upsides, such as the fact that Vote 411 can piggyback on the National League's much greater visibility, and the back end interface for candidates and volunteers to use when they're importing data is much simpler with Vote 411. So there was quite a learning curve with Voters Edge, and I'm hoping that it'll be much easier for the volunteers and the candidates, which when it's easier for the candidates, it's easier for the volunteers too, because then we don't have to help the candidates quite so much. So for the March 5th primary election, we need 3 kinds of volunteers to help make Vote 411 an effective tool for San Diego County voters. Number 1 is the research team. Again, with Voters Edge, we were able to present links to articles. With Vote 411, we won't be able to do that. However, we still need people to research to help us track down some of the candidates who don't authorize the registrar of voters to release their contact info. It's very difficult to invite somebody to participate in something if you don't have a way to contact them. The second team of volunteers is the telephone team, and we do send bulk emails to the candidates whose emails we have, but the telephone team can follow up and make sure that they received those. As the email filters get more and more aggressive at weeding out spam, it's important for candidates to have several nudges to look for this email. It's important, and be sure to get your information up on our free campaign publicity site. And then finally are the locos, which are the local coordinators, and these manage a set of candidates and help their submissions, and they do data entry for the ballot measures sometimes. And there are several options for this more technical training of approximately 2 hours, and these will be offered by the State League via Zoom in November and December of 2022. So depending on your availability and interest, the time commitment might be between 1 hour a week, or even 1 hour. If that's all you have, we'll take it. Some people really enjoyed working on the voter guide, and they put in many more hours than that. And most of these hours can be done at your convenience, the wee hours of the morning, because if it's data entry, no one knows when that's, you're not bothering anybody. Please contact me, Julie Ann, at juliann.s@lwvsandiego.org to learn more about this fun, time flexible way to have a big impact on the ability of voters to make informed decisions. And thank you very much.
All right, thanks very much, Julianne. And by the way, we'll be sending out the email addresses for each of these leaders tomorrow, along with the video, in case people missed anything. So next, I would like to introduce again Jean Widener to talk about democracy dollars. That's one of our issues for emphasis this year. And we're a part of a coalition who's doing important work on that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Kim. Yes, I'm happy to, our advocacy co-director, Allison Sullivan, wasn't able to join with us tonight. So, but this is a project that I've been enthusiastic about for a couple of years and would like to get other people enthusiastic about it. It's Democracy Dollars is a project of the Voters' Voice Coalition here locally. And this coalition includes members from Common Cause, Represent Us, as well as the League. There's a couple of other lesser known community organizations called Engage, Piper Fund, and Rethink. And they, the effort for the Democracy Dollars is to try to get public financing of local elections. And the method by which this would be accomplished is by providing vouchers to voters who in turn can give them to their chosen candidate. And right now, the coalition is meeting bi-weekly, and they are engaging with local officials to get their feeling about, we want to have obviously local candidates sign up for this, because if they sign up for public financing, it would mean that they cannot take outside money to finance their campaigns. And we are attempting to get this on the ballot either in 2024 or 2026, so that voters can make the decision about how they would like their local elections to be financed. And let me just show you this. I will put the I'm going to put the website for Voters' Voice into the chat there. And I would also like to just show you the website right now, just so you can visit it at your leisure. They have a very brief video that you can click on it's a little 5-minute video that explains the process of how Democracy Dollars would work, how these vouchers would work. And you can also check out some of the other things on their website to know how their efforts are being directed to get this on the ballot, hopefully within the next couple of election cycles. So Allison is our liaison on this. Jeannie Brown had been in the past, but Allison, as one of our advocacy co-directors, is now going to serve as liaison. But I invite you all to see if this is an effort that you would also like to be involved in. So the one caveat that I would like to say about this as chair of the Speakers Bureau is that it is very important for us to keep our advocacy efforts and our education efforts separate, especially during an election cycle. So if you elect to get involved in advocacy, in this advocacy effort, and do presentations or do educational efforts about it, you unfortunately will not be able to do our nonpartisan pros and cons, so that we know we can say that we are definitely a nonpartisan, and that we do have an educational arm that it is devoted to that entirely.